Play the one about the drunk cow and the butter churn, Sim said. I couldn't help but crack a smile. Maybe later, I said as I picked up my increasingly shabby loot case and made my way to the hearth amid the sound of scattered familiar applause. It took me a long moment to open the case, untwisting the copper wire I was still using in place of a buckle. For the next 2 hours, I played. I sang Copper Bottom Pot, Lilac Bough, and Aunt Emmy's Tub. The audience laughed and clapped and cheered. As I fingered my way through the songs, I felt my worries slough away. My music has always been the best remedy for my dark moods. As I sang, even my bruises seemed to pain me less. Then I felt a chill, as if a strong winter wind was blowing down the chimney behind me. I fought off a shiver and finished the last verse of Applejack, which I'd finally played to keep Sim happy. When I struck the last chord, the crowd applauded and conversation slowly welled up to fill the room again. I looked behind me at the fireplace, but the fire was burning cheerfully with no sign of a draught. I stepped down off the hearth, hoping a little walk would chase my chill away, but as soon as I took a few steps, I realized that wasn't the case. The cold settled straight into my bones. I turned back to the fireplace, spreading my hands to warm them. Will and Sim appeared at my side. "What's going on?" Sim asked. "You look like you're going to be sick." "Something like that," I said, clenching my teeth to keep them from chattering. "Go and tell Anchor I'm feeling ill and have to cut it short tonight. Then light a candle off this fire and bring it up to my room." I looked up at their serious faces. "Will, can you help me get out of here? I don't want to make a scene." Willem nodded and gave me his arm. I leaned on him and concentrated on keeping my body from shaking as we made our way to the stairs. No one paid us much attention. I probably looked more drunk than anything. My hands were numb and heavy, my lips felt icy cold. After the first flight of stairs, I couldn't keep my shaking under control any longer. I could still walk, but the thick muscles in my legs twitched with every step. Will stopped. "We should go to medico." While he didn't sound different, his Celtish accent was thicker, and he was starting to drop words, a sign he was genuinely worried. I shook my head firmly and leaned forward, knowing he'd have to help me up the stairs or let me fall. Willem put an arm around me and half-steadied, half-carried me the rest of the way. Once in my tiny room, I staggered onto the bed. Will wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. There were footsteps in the hallway and Sim peered nervously around the door. He held a stub of candle, sheltering the flame with his other hand as he walked. "I've got it. What do you want it for anyway?" "There." I pointed to the table beside the bed. "You lit it off the fire?" Sim's eyes were frightened. "Your lips," he said. "They're not a good colour." I pried a splinter from the rough wood of the bedside table and jabbed it hard into the back of my hand. Blood welled up and I rolled the long splinter around in it, getting it wet. "Close the door," I said. "You are not doing what I think you're doing," Sim said firmly. I jabbed the long splinter down into the soft wax of the candle alongside the burning wick. It sputtered a little bit, then the flame wrapped around it. I muttered 2 bindings, one right after the other, speaking slowly so my numb lips didn't slur the words. "What are you doing?" Sim demanded. "Are you trying to cook yourself?" When I didn't answer him, he stepped forward as if he would knock the candle over. Will caught his arm. "His hands are like ice," he said quietly. "He's cold, really cold." Sim's eyes darted nervously between the two of us. He took a step back. Just be careful." But I was already ignoring him. I closed my eyes and bound the candle flame to the fire downstairs. Then I carefully made the second connection between the blood on the splinter and the blood in my body. It was very much like what I'd done with the drop of wine at the Aeolian, with the obvious exception that I didn't want my blood to boil. At first there was just a brief tickle of heat, not nearly enough. I concentrated harder and felt my entire body relax as warmth flooded through me. I kept my eyes closed, keeping my attention on the bindings until I could take several long, deep breaths without any shuddering or shaking. I opened my eyes and saw my 2 friends looking on expectantly. I smiled at them. "I'm okay." But before I got the words out, I began to sweat. I was suddenly too warm, nauseatingly warm. I broke both bindings as quickly as you jerk your hand away from a hot iron stove. I took a few deep breaths, then got to my feet and walked over to the window. I opened it and leaned heavily on the sill, enjoying the chill autumn air that smelled of dead leaves and coming rain. There was a long moment of silence. "That looked like binder's chills," Simon said. "Really bad binder's chills." "It felt like the chills," I said. "Maybe your body has lost the ability to regulate its own temperature," Willem suggested. "Temperature," Sim corrected him absently. "That wouldn't account for the burn across my chest," I said. Sim cocked his head. "Burn?" I was wet with sweat now, so I was glad for an excuse to unbutton my shirt and pull it off over my head. A large portion of my chest and upper arm was a bright red, a sharp contrast to my ordinarily pale skin. Mola said it was a rash, and I was being fussy as an old woman, but it wasn't there before I jumped into the river. Simon leaned close to look. "I still think it's unbound principles," he said. "They can do bizarre things to a person. We had an Elia last term that wasn't careful with his factoring. He ended up not being able to sleep or focus his eyes for almost 2 span. Willem slouched into a chair. "What makes a man cold, then hot, then cold again?" Sim gave a half-hearted smile. "Sounds like a riddle." "I hate riddles," I said, reaching for my shirt. Then I yelped, clutching at the bare bicep of my left arm. Blood welled out between my fingers. Sim bolted to his feet, looking around frantically, obviously at a loss for what to do. It felt like I'd been stabbed by an invisible knife. "God blackened gum!" I gritted out between my clenched teeth. I pulled my hand away and saw the small, round wound in my arm that had come from nowhere. Simon's expression was horrified, his eyes wide, his hands covering his mouth. He said something, but I was too busy concentrating to listen. I already knew what he was saying anyway. Malfeasance, of course. This was all malfeasance. Someone was attacking me. I lowered myself into the heart of stone and brought all my Allah to bear. But my unknown attacker wasn't wasting any time. There was a sharp pain in my chest near the shoulder. It didn't break the skin this time, but I watched a blotch of dark blue blossom under my skin. I hardened my Allah, and the next stab was little more than a pinch. Then I quickly broke my mind into 3 pieces and gave 2 of them the job of maintaining the Allah that protected me. Only then did I let out a deep sigh. "I'm fine." Simon gave a laugh that choked off into a sob. His hand still covered his mouth. "How can you say that?" he demanded, plainly horrified. I looked down at myself. Blood was still welling up through my fingers, running down the back of my hand and my arm. "It's true," I said to him. "Honestly, Sim." "But malfeasance," he said. "It just isn't done." I sat down on the edge of my bed, keeping pressure on my wound. "I think we have some pretty clear proof otherwise." Willem sat back down. "I'm with Simon. I would never have believed this." He made an angry gesture. "Our chemists do not do this anymore. It is insane." He looked at me. "Why are you smiling?" "I'm relieved," I said honestly. "I was worried I'd given myself cadmium poisoning, or I had some mysterious disease. This is just someone trying to kill me." "How could someone do it?" Simon asked. "I don't mean morally. How did someone get hold of your blood or hair?" Willem looked at Simon. "What did you do with the bandages after you stitched them up?" "I burned them," Sim said defensively. "I'm not an idiot." Will made a calming gesture. "Just narrowing our options. That probably isn't the Medicare either. They're careful about that sort of thing." Simon stood up. "We have to tell someone." He looked at Willem. "Would Jameson still be in his office at this time of night?" "Sim," I said, "how about we just wait for a while?" "What?" Simon said. "Why?" The only evidence I have are my injuries, I said. That means they'll want someone at the Medica to examine me, and when that happens, with one hand still clamped over my bloody arm, I waved my bandaged elbow. I look remarkably like someone who fell off a roof just a couple of days ago. Sim sat back down in his chair. It's only been 3 days, hasn't it? I nodded. I'd be expelled, and Mola would be in trouble for not mentioning my injuries. Master Arwill isn't forgiving about that sort of thing. The two of you would probably be implicated too. I don't want that. We were quiet for a moment. The only sound was the distant clamour of the busy taproom below. I sat down on the bed. Do we even need to discuss who's doing this? Sim asked. Ambrose, I said. It's always Ambrose. He must have found some of my blood on a piece of roofing tile. I should have thought of that days ago. How would he know it was yours? Simon asked. Because I hate him, I said bitterly. Of course he knows it was me.